Recite the opening prayers. Okay, can I volunteer somebody? Matt, how about you? We haven't had you do this for a while. Would you mind doing the opening prayers?
Sure. Sorry. Bear with me for a second.
Caught you in the middle of a banana sandwich, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang warje pedra, no parje pege, tarpa dan tamche kin pe bardu, jo parje pa tamche ki soje pe, manam ka dang yam pe semchen tamche de wa dang den, du now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag par zo pe shang shu brim po she to par ja. The Action Bodhicitta Prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang magye ki bardu lu nyangi samge wala ko. Mashe bardu lu nyangi samge wala ko. Du de ring ne sung de ni ma sang da samgi. Bardu lu nyangi samge wala ko. Long Refuge Prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Drinchen sa wa dangu par che pe, pelden lama dampa namla kyab su chiyo, yidam kyo kor gila so namla kyab su chiyo, sangye chum dende namla kyab su chiyo, dampa dampe sho namla kyab su chiyo, pagpe gindun namla kyab su chiyo, pa wo kandro chokyong sung me so gyeshe ki chendang den pa namla kyab su chiyo. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Jiangshub Ning Porchi Ki Bar Sangye Nam La Kyap Suchi Chodang Jiangshub Senpai Sog La Deshen Kyap Suchi Jitar Nungi Deshe Ki Jiangshub Dugni Kye Padang Jiangshub Senpai La Pala Di Dedang Rimshin Ne Patar Dejin Drola Pendondu Jiangshub Semni Kegi Zing Dejin Du Ni La Pa La Rimpa Jindu La Parji. A short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chok Namla, Jiangsu Badu Dakni Kyab Suchi, Dagi Jin Sogi Pe Sonamki, Drola Penshir Sangye Drupa Sho. The Four Measurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam ka dang yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang de we jir gu dang den par jor shi du now dang du now gi gu dang draw war jor chik du now me pe de wa dang mi draw war jor shik ne ring chak dang ni dang draw we dang Nom la ne pa jor shi. Would you like to do the Vajrasattva tonight, or go right to the Sagar Mutta?
Yes, no. Go right. Look, go right ahead and do the Vajrasattva, and then go to page 12.
Okay. Do it once in English, then 3 in the Sanskrit.
That'd be great.
Om Vajrasattva Samaya, help to protect my vow to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind, heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Deno Patita Drido Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasa Sarva Karma Susami Sisam Shriya Kuru Hong Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Munsa Bajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattvaha Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dredo Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Susami Sitan Shriya Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Bajramami Munsa Bajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manopalaya Vajrasattva Dino Pajista Drido Mebawa Sutokayo Mebava Supokayo Mebava Anurakto Mebava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Susami Sitan Shriya Kuru Hum Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Munsa Bajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva. In the Sagarmati requested sutra. Likewise be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food and drink peacefully, enjoy it, and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated.
Okay, thank you. If you have the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, if you have this text, I'm going to screen share it. I hope. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now we'll recite and contemplate on the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. Precious human life. The freedoms and advantages so extremely difficult to obtain accomplish the purpose of human life. If one does not achieve benefit from this now, how could this opportunity come again? Oh, this kind of leisure and endowment is supremely difficult to obtain. When one obtains a body which is easily lost, do not waste it meaninglessly, but rather use it to attain ultimate liberation, joyous result. So then contemplate the meaning of this precious human life. You may read this over again quietly to yourself. Consider the 8 leisures and the 10 endowments, 5 internal endowments and the 5 external endowments. Okay. Then we go to the next impermanence, which is the next 2 pages. Ka. No matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities? Yes, they are lies. Ka. The 8 worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? In the certainty of death, and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. Impermanence makes departure certain, like the shadow of the setting sun. Abandoning laziness and indifference, blaze like fire in fierce diligence. This life is impermanent, like clouds in the autumn sky. Birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or a dance. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky, like water falling from a steep mountain cliff. It departs quickly, quickly. The nature of all phenomena is impermanence. Death is a certainty to all who are born. Death can descend any time, like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. So contemplate the meaning of impermanence. You may read this over again quietly to yourself and consider the 8 worldly concerns, the 8 worldly dharmas, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disgrace. Contemplate. Okay. So now we turn to the next is the suffering of samsara. Consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. In the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, there is not an instant of absolute happiness. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. Contemplate the meaning of the suffering of samsara, sometimes called the faults of samsara. What is being referenced here are the 3 lower realms of samsara, the animal realm, the hungry ghost predator realm, and the hot and cold hell realms. Those are the 3 lower realms. The 3 higher realms of samsara are the Deva God realm, the Asura demigod realm, the Titan realm, and the human realm. Contemplate the meaning of the suffering of samsara.
You're muted, Lance.
Sorry about that. Karma. So now karma, cause and result. Even if one were a king at the time of death, one's possessions, enjoyments, friends, and retinue will not follow. But wherever that sentient being goes, his karma follows after him like a shadow. The fruit of one's positive karma is happiness. Suffering is the fruit of negative karma. The inexorable karmic causation is the mode of abiding in all dharmas. Henceforth, practice the Dharma by distinguishing between what should be practiced and what should be given up. Contemplate the meaning of karma, cause and result. Okay, thank you very much. So how does that land on you? Let's talk about this for a few minutes. The four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. How relevant is this to your practice? Do you recite this to yourself as you're doing your own practice at home? Have you been able to incorporate it into your practice? If you haven't, would you like to? And if you haven't, why haven't you? So I'd like to get some feedback from everybody. So Faiza, can I ask you first? What do you think of the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma?
I did a lot of contemplation, and yeah, it really hit really close to home for me, because I went through a lot of stuff, that I've experienced, or pain that I've caused, or pain that I've received, and I it was all very relevant when I put it in a microscopic view. Um, So that's going to be really useful for me to refer to in the future. And I think the contemplation really helped in this session. Um, I think just giving us the time to contemplate it helped me go through that and really pinpoint how to make those connections. So that was really helpful for me. And yes, I would love to use that in the future.
Very good. Thank you. Do you have your copy of that?
They're all stored in my little ottoman here, so I just have to look through it and find it.
Okay. It's good to have all those materials handy, when you to develop a practice and everything, and to have those as a thought comes up to say, oh, I got some literature on that. I got a teaching on that. Let me get it out. And that can be your practice for that day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gary, how about you? I know, for a long time we've talked about this, the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. And do you continue to use it? And how do you feel about that?
Yes, I do use it, but I have to be honest with you, and we're about the same distance along in life, and I have never been able to fully understand suffering. And still, when I consider some of the suffering I've seen over the sweep of my life, I have seen people suffer that I didn't think I couldn't understand what they had done to deserve what was happening to them without getting into linear detail. I've seen very good people suffer enormously inexplicable things. And it's always been hard for me to sort out why they do. I think that sometimes that the suffering that some people experience, in my opinion before, and an opinion that I still hold on to, quite honestly, is because of the iniquity of others, because of the fierceness or meanness or absolute barbarism of others, the selfishness of others. And I know that suffering is real. I know that to one extent or another, we all suffer. And I believe that all of us, maybe I should just speak for myself, have caused other people to suffer. But there are people I've seen in life, some of my life experiences, that I connected their suffering with injustice.
Well, what about the suffering within yourself?
Well, that's a very good point. I think that I know that I don't think I'm unusual. I tend to internalize a lot of things that I see or feel. I tend to take some things personally that really don't involve me personally, but they affect me personally because I internalize them. And sometimes it is because of a feeling that I should have done something that didn't. I didn't have the courage to do it, or the wisdom to do it, or I simply didn't have the ability to do anything. And I had the exasperation of suffering, seeing suffering around me, seeing other people behave in a way that I couldn't stop them from behaving, that was imposing suffering on others. We impose, certainly I do, suffering on ourselves by thinking, by not letting go of some things. But I have had trouble sometimes trying to draw a distinction between letting go and indifference. If I just let go of this and don't try to stop it or solve it, and I'm being indifferent. And if I'm being indifferent, am I being irresponsible or selfish? So it's a quandary for me. The question of suffering, my own and the suffering that I see, is a quandary for me.
Well, you think we're talking about, I think that injury to the body, the suffering that we have from sickness or injury or something, is is easily apparent, and to understand, maybe what the causes for that are. But to think about the emotional suffering that we have, the confusion that we have,
That's
the
what I was
not,
talking about
the
mostly.
not knowing, and how do we sort that out, and how can we liberate ourselves, like you just said? How can we let go of that kind of suffering?
Well, I think that we suffer. I know I suffer. We suffer more today sometimes because we know more. We're in a storm of information that we didn't always have. The world comes at us like a stampede, and we see it, and we don't want it to be that way. And we realize that we may be able to do a little something in our own lives, but some things seem to be getting worse. And that causes me suffering because it causes exasperation. I think of all the many things that so many people have done unselfishly to relieve the suffering of others. Maybe it's because of modern technology, we just become aware of more and more suffering. And we have to, so if you become aware of anything, if you know something is happening, then you, as a human being, as any sentient being, you process it in one way or the other. If you process it, you suffer. If it is, if it's a bad thing, there are things you can find joy in, but you suffer when you see some of the things that we see today. And you know that you can do nothing but see it and feel badly about it, and that is suffering.
So do you see that so suffering like that, I mean, what you just said, I think is very good, it's very wise and so on. And full of your experience, and but do you see that these four thoughts help us to deal with that suffering, and that what results is a precious human life?
Well, I think I understand what you're saying. You know, where I end up is with myself is I have to be forgiving of myself first of all. If I can't forgive myself, I can't forgive others. If you've condemned yourself, you've condemned others, and if you keep imposing suffering on yourself, you will inevitably impose suffering on others. So I forgive myself for my lack of ability to solve all the problems I think should be solved. And as I look back on a long life, which was I thought framed in the quest to make things better, I'm left with the thought sometimes that things are not that much better. They're more modern in a lot of ways. We have more things that go faster and higher. Some of us in certain societies are living longer because of our access to certain things medically. But even in the most modern of places, there is still this suffering. And and I struggle with that.
All right. Well, let me ask Bernie. He's got his microphone on, and he's of our generation, so we're brothers in arms in that regard. So I'd like to have Bernie comment on this. What he would say about the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, and how he's been able to use that, or has he not needed to use it? You know, in his uh, years as a practitioner and as a yogi and so on. What would you say to that, Bernie?
Well, as I understand it, the purpose of the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma is to overcome laziness. We don't want to practice as much as we should. And so it's painting the situation that we are in and pointing out first, we have the ability to to improve our situation. That's the precious human birth. But time is limited because of impermanence. And the situation we are in is not that good. That's the truth of suffering. So we need to get out of our current situation. And we can't rely on just doing good deeds, because that's just going to get us to one of the other realms. We're sort of like a fly in the bottle. The fly can go to the top of the bottle or it can go to the bottom of the bottle, but it's still inside the bottle. And karma is to show us that if we want to get out of the situation, the first step is to first accumulate good karma and avoid accumulating bad karma, because that's going to destroy our opportunity to practice in the future. So that's how I understand it. And of course, as part of the Nundro, I did this every day while I was doing Nundro, and that was a long 10 years. So I'm very well acquainted with these and the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. But that's how I understand it. It's basically a motivation for practice. And it works, I guess. Sure, it works.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Matthew, how about you? What would you have to say about the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma? Is this part of your routine? Do you see a value in making it part of your routine?
Yeah, no, for sure. And The framer explanation you just gave, Bernie, was really helpful. I really liked that. Yeah, yeah. I would say it's probably the main thing I do, to be honest. My practice, it's the one thing that I always spend a decent amount of time on, and then other things kind of revolve around that, I guess. I think I might like when I do it, it kind of expand it out a little bit more because they're very like generalizable, profound kind of topics too. I mean, just in and of themselves like this, but also like something like impermanence, where I think I do like kind of just an overall impermanence type of meditation or contemplation with it too when I'm doing it, or even just like suffering and kind of like trying to remind myself and see over and over again what's causing my suffering, things like that. But yeah, it's a big part of my practice. Yeah.
Okay. Do you often find yourself when you sit down to do your daily practice, or how often you do it, that by going through and doing these prayers sparks some thoughts within your mind that you didn't expect to be thinking about, but this reminded you of something?
Um, yeah, yeah, I think so. I guess didn't think of it quite that way, but yeah, yeah, at times, and it gives me other things to contemplate. Um, and then I'll usually do some kind of like shamatha or type of something like that afterwards as well, though. But yeah, I think so.
Okay. Before I come to Zara, I want to ask Mark, would you like to comment on anything right now, Mark?
If you don't mind, I think I'd prefer just to listen.
Okay. Zara, would you like to comment on the four thoughts? Ah, well, maybe Zara's not available right now. Okay. Well,
Can I
then,
ask a question?
yeah, sure.
For you, like Lance and Bernie, too, maybe since you have been, really much longer term practitioners, did the your work with the four thoughts, did it have that effect on you of kind of rooting out some of that laziness around practice or lack of desire to practice or focusing you on the Dharma more, or maybe that wasn't even needed as much, but
Well, for me personally, absolutely. And I continue to recite it every day. And some days it's just the recitation and I'm just kind of moving through it. But other days, there might be something in the back of my mind or something that it gives me an opportunity to stop and contemplate, that which was something that happened to me or something's about to happen to me and so on. So I see it as a daily practice to reaffirm, to reconnect with the Dharma, how important the Dharma is, why we connect with the Dharma, what the Dharma is there for. So that's how I look at it. So yeah, it's very good. And if there's times when I sometimes will take a break from it, and I come back to it, how richer it becomes to me, how much more experience now I've got to contemplate with it and so on. So it's part of the opening prayers. It's part of remembering why we are on the path that we are on.
yeah, thanks.
As far as I'm concerned, well, no, it hasn't worked as well as it should have because I'm still pretty lazy. So it's it should have worked better. Also, I can say is when you reach my age, you don't really need to meditate so much on impermanence, because when you're my age, it's all around you. People getting sick and dying. Every time you open the newspaper, somebody who was a well known to you, typically it's some musician or somebody. Oh, they just died. You know,
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I used to listen to them all the time on the radio. Now they're dead. Impermanence, it kicks you in the face when you get old. I got to say that. And certainly I'm aware of karma. So I'm aware of karma every single day. So not something, I guess I've taken that to heart. As far as suffering goes, well, I'm kind of enjoying samsara a lot of the time. Maybe not right now, but many times I'm enjoying samsara. So I'm not really experiencing the fool's horror. That was something Gurdjieff always used to say. You've got to appreciate the horror of the situation. You have to appreciate the full horror of the situation that you find yourself in right now. And that's difficult to maintain. So, unfortunately. So, like I say, if I was appreciated it more, I'd be less lazy, but I try to do my best.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
In the Jewel Ornamental Liberation, the headings for these different sections, for these parts of the book, are very useful, because to take an example, what we're talking about with impermanence and what we're talking about with the suffering of samsara, and what we're talking about with the karma cause and result, is the application, is the method to be able to overcome our attachments to this life. That we get attached to this life and we don't want to liberate from this life, and we'll make all kinds of rationalizations and excuses about how we want to be in this life and so on, that this life is all that we know, and so we're not ready to let it go. So by understanding our circumstance, and not to be morose about it, that's one thing that a lot of people might say about Buddhism is, you're always talking about suffering, you're always talking about death, you're always talking about letting go and so on. Why can't you just enjoy what you've got here and so on? And there is happiness here, but it all turns, it all becomes suffering. It all becomes a change in our lives where our bodies get old, we get sick, and so on like that. And many times, for myself, I've had times when I say to myself, oh, I wish I was dead. Oh, I wish I was dying. I got the flu. And sometimes you get the flu, and the flu is so bad. You say, my goodness, I'd just rather die right now than have to be suffering this. And there's other illnesses, and there's injuries that you can have. There's the pain of lost love or something like that, of purely emotional things that you say, oh my goodness, this is terrible. How can I bear this anymore? I can't endure this anymore. I'd rather face the unknown, and maybe I get to start over. But then if we get to start over, the notion of starting over means that you're still attached to life, because you don't want to come back as a horse. You don't want to come back as an animal or as an insect. You want to come back as a human being. You want to be able to pick up where you leave off. That's how attached to this life, you see, we are. We think we can do that. So by pointing us in this direction of impermanence and the causes of suffering and the karma and so on like that, is showing us how all this is all fabricated within our own selves. That's what we have to recognize, is that we've created this whole situation for ourselves. And by taking that kind of responsibility, we're able to make choices. So here in this Four Thoughts that Turn the Mind to the Dharma, it points out those choices. It points out what it is to be a precious human being. And like Bernie said, that we can choose not to be lazy anymore. That I'm really going to engage. I'm going to have the joyous result of this life. I'm not going to take it for granted. I'm going to have the joyous result of this life. And what would that be? It would be being able to release from the suffering. The suffering sometimes is explained as a I've heard it. If you ask a fish who is in the fish bowl, or a fish who is in the water in the ocean or something, and to you, we would die immediately by drowning in that fish bowl or in that water or something. And we go to the fish and say, well, how do you like being in that ocean of suffering? How do you like being in that water? And the fish looks at you and says, well, what water? What are you talking about? You know, there are probably beings who we're in just this atmosphere of air who would instantly die. If we took the fish out of the water and put them in our atmosphere, they would die. So it's a matter of being taking so much for granted our situation that we don't realize the potential that we live in, the potential for impermanence, the potential for happiness. So these are all called to our attention through the practice of the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So it's actuated through the karma and the suffering of samsara, recognizing what the samsara is. So these, what I just said, are not very concrete statements, but what it helps us to do is to be able to have the contemplation, to allow ourselves to have the contemplation, to think about these things, to have the critical thinking of what our situation is, and then to look at the devices that we have within the Buddha Dharma, the Dharma teachings, to be able to release ourselves from the attachment to this life. Because if we're attached or we have aversion to it, then, that's what we're trying to guard ourselves from. We're trying to liberate ourselves. We're trying to be free. So in the case of the impermanence, it's so much a part of what we are, who we are, that we don't see the impermanence. We see it all as some degree of permanence. So that requires a teacher. That requires the supreme, the spiritual guide, the spiritual teacher to help us to see it. But once we accept those kinds of teachings, then we can start working through it ourselves. When we get to the suffering of samsara, the suffering of samsara is the attachment to the pleasures of this life. So we need to be able to understand what those pleasures are and recognize that those pleasures are impermanent and they will turn. So we need to think about, well, what are the different features of this life? What are the different features of this samsara? So we've talked about this before, but maybe not in these terms. So the features are the 6 realms, the 6 human realms, that as being a human being, simultaneously, we are going through 6 different mindsets all at the same time. They're in different degrees and they shift. So the 6 different realms that we talk about are the God realm, where there's just this appears to be this pure pleasure, where there is this demigod realm, where there is this pure manipulation of things and being able to acquire power and identity. There is the human realm, where there is this resistance to change, but yet that's the good thing that we have in this life, in this human life, is that we are able to change, that we're able to see these things. And then there's the ignorance that we face that is characterized by the animal realm, that we just don't know a lot of things, like animals just don't know a lot of things. We can see that ignorance in the animals, and then we can use that to kind of translate for the ignorance that we have within ourselves. So that becomes a contemplative device, something that we look at. But then there's also the misery of the selfishness that we go through, the misery of the insatiability that we have, that we, whatever we have, we want more. And we want to keep it for ourselves. We don't want to share it. The greediness of the hungry ghost realm, that we can see that we're going through this all the time, that we're thinking about, oh, I need to have more of this. I need to have, I'm not going to share it with anybody or something like those things. And the last is the hell realms, that we've done very negative things. We've done things that are causing us to constantly be threatened, to constantly be afraid that we are going to perish in one way or another. Our identity is going to be lost, our life is going to be lost, our body's going to be lost, our material things are going to be lost because of past deeds. We're constantly living in some kind of fear. We're always looking over our shoulder, so to speak, that somebody or something is going to get even with us for all the things that we've done that are worthy of retribution and so on. So the dynamic of being a human being is being in these 6 realms and being able to, we either fall prey to this and we develop all the neurotic behavior that we have, all the confusions we have, all the uncomfortability that we have, the uncertainty we have, or we can kind of divide and conquer. We go through each of these different realms. We go through each of these different stages. We use the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma to kind of separate these items and conquer them by understanding them, by understanding what the causes of them are, what the results of them are, what the actions that we have taken that have precipitated these actions and so on. And we find that these actions become the causes for something else later on, later today, tomorrow, next week, next lifetime, whatever it is. So this suffering of samsara, as is being described here in the Jewel in the Middle Liberation, is the method to understand the antidote to the attachment to life's pleasures, to samsara's pleasures, to the why are we attached to this ocean of suffering? Why have we made the rationalizations that we've done, and so on? To continue at the next part, the method for the next part is karma, cause and result. That it's through the karma, cause and result that we see how we have made those choices, what the causes were. And so if we're going to make changes, where do we make the changes? At what level do we make the changes? Do we make changes before we do the action? We say, oh, here's a cause for me to do something, to get angry. Here's a cause for me to have love. Here's a cause for me to get even with somebody. Here's the cause for me to embrace somebody. Or, and then you say, okay, I recognize that, but I'm not going to take the action. I'm just going to sit. I'm just going to sit away. I'm not going to engage in that. And therefore, I'm not going to have the result of that. So that question is a complicated, it has a complicated answer. You can't say that it's, one thing or another. It's a combination of these things that we experience through trial and error by experiencing. And that's what this life is. This life, we have this life as a means of experience, to be able to understand all these vicissitudes, all these changes that we have choices over. It seems as though these things are being foisted upon us. It seems like these people are getting mad at us. It seems like, because I have this life, I have this job, I have these different problems and so on, and it's true to a point, but the deeper point is that we made the choice to have these kinds of occurrences, to put ourselves in this situation. So now we have to work our way through this, to endure this, and to be able to liberate us from further suffering. The best way to do this is not selfishly for ourselves, but we learn more by working with other people who have difficulty, who, like the teacher is helping us. These books are helping us. These teachings are helping us. Then we take them, digest them, and then we use them for the benefit of other beings. And this becomes the greatest teacher when we become a helper to other people. Then we can see, like in a mirror, we can see, oh, I'm really talking about myself here, aren't I? That this is going to help me too, because the reason why I'm able to communicate this is because I have empathy for this. I understand what this is to whatever degree, but then we kind of refine that. We kind of purify that through the experience of helping other beings. So I know that several of the people here I'm looking at in the screen right now are all counselors of one type or another who are helping people who have some kind of less fortunate life than we might have. And it's notable and it's wonderful that you're able to do that. You know, that you've given yourself that gift to be able to help other people and everything. But it's helping you too. And the teachings that you are giving other people, the help that you are giving other people is all meant for you. You know, all this love that we're giving to others has all been meant for ourselves, to love ourselves as well as loving other people. So there's that state of flux, if you will, that we're always moving through, that state of flux, that dualistic nature that we always have. And that state of flux is that attachment and aversions to the pleasures that turn into pain, that turn into suffering, that turn into confusion. Our intentions may be pure. We want this to be happiness, but we're not able to maintain that. Is this making any kind of sense? Would anybody like to comment on this? Okay. So if you're looking at your 101 outline book, and we're talking about chapter 5, that in the book that I have, it is page 8 in that outline book. We're talking about the method, the antidote to attachment to samsara's pleasures, the pleasures that were attached to these things, the nice day that we had, the car that we drive, and all these things. When everything's working great, it's wonderful. But when things start breaking down, and doesn't it always seem that things start breaking down in multiple numbers? There's never just one thing. It's one thing after another. Does that happen to you? I mean, that seems to happen to me. You know, and you say, oh my goodness, well, this is the second thing I got to deal with this week or something like that. And then, you know, sometimes things seem to happen in threes. I'm waiting for the shoe to fall, you know, for the third thing to come, so that I can deal with that and then maybe get all this behind me and so on. But if I'm fighting it, if I'm fighting it that, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this, oh, it's going to drive me crazy, oh, I'm not going to be able to sleep, all these different things, rather than saying, let's divide and conquer. Let's compartmentalize. Let's look at each of these things by themselves. It may be not as quick. We want to do this right away, but it's so interconnected. We can't do it right away. So if we divide and conquer, no matter how much time it takes, we can find a solution to it. And the beauty of all that is when you find a solution, there, all of a sudden everything becomes clear. And usually it becomes clear because we've accepted the responsibility. Oh, this is going to cost me $500. You know, something happened with my car. I'm so frustrated about it, you know. Well, after this $500, you know, maybe it'll be over, something like that. or I've got this illness, I got to go see the doctor, I got to do all this stuff for a period of time, and so on. So, but if we do everything a little bit at a time, we find that there's a clarity there that comes to us. Oh, this is the wise way to do this, because we've been through this many times. And you've experienced this clarity many times, but you may not have recognized it so many times. So now it's becoming a wise person, having experience with this and being able to say, oh, I can rely on my past experience to help me through this. I can rely on these practices to help me with those things that were more abstract, that I couldn't find in the books that I was reading in school, or I couldn't find in the books that I was reading in for recreation, or the movies that I was watching, or the conversations I was having with other people and so on. I couldn't find solutions to those problems. But in these books that I have now, that there are deeper problems. Now I'm finding solutions for those, and I'm bringing those into my life. And now I'm seeing my life in a much broader context and seeing the interconnectivity of all of this. So this brings me to the all-pervading suffering. That there's three different levels or different types of suffering that human beings go through. And there's the all-pervading suffering. And this all-pervading suffering is sometimes described as unripe fruit that hasn't ripened. You know, you go to the store and you buy some peaches and you take them home, you want to eat the peach, but it's hard as a rock. And you got to wait, 4 or 5 days for it to ripen, and then it's delicious. It's ready to be eaten and so on. But sometimes this all-pervading suffering is like that unripe fruit, that everything has this hardness to it. Everything has this difficulty thing to it. And so but there's a neutrality to it that we can't get angry at it. We got to give it time. We got to give it its natural ability to come to its fruition, that we can't rush that process. We can't rush our understanding of our spirituality. It's abstract. We got to look at it very carefully, slowly, integrate it into our recognition of what's happening in our lives, and then we become a master of not falling prey to the causes of confusion anymore, because we've applied these lessons of spirituality. So this neutral feeling of this all-pervading suffering, that it happens to everything and it happens to everybody. It's not felt as suffering by ordinary beings, but it's felt by those who know the difference, who know, it's expressed as noble ones by enlightened beings, or those beings who are on the path to become enlightened. They recognize, we've got to create a process to make a manufacturing factory, and we have to employ these people and so on. And people are going to have to learn how to do these different tasks and so on. And there's going to be some suffering that has to be done there. And the people, as they're doing it, they're going through the suffering of saying, oh, I can't do this. It's too hard. I'm never going to be successful at this. Or maybe they hurt themselves in the process of doing it in one way or another. But the noble ones are recognizing, well, this is part of the process. This is the all-pervading suffering of all of this. And there has to be a neutrality of not getting emotionally involved with it. We have to have the patience, the perseverance to let this all work out. So the suffering goes to those of who can recognize that. Ordinary beings may not see that. They might see it in their families, they might see it with their kids, but for themselves, they may not be able to see it. We need to be able to recognize it for ourselves, this all-pervading suffering. There's also the suffering of change. That's this is like eating poisonous rice or something that's poison. It, we don't understand, we're eating it and it tastes just fine. Food, whatever it is. But over a short period of time, we start to get sick. But we were enjoying while we were eating. It was delicious. And then we start getting sick and we don't know the impending suffering that's to come. But then we get that suffering from that change, from having eaten that. So we go through things. We enter into relationships. We enter into jobs. We take responsibility for buying certain things and putting it on our credit cards, and then we have to deal with it later on. And we didn't know that this was all going to cascade into this big problem. And now I'm looking for somebody to help me get through this financial debacle that I'm in now. I have the suffering of change. I have all these things that I couldn't afford. Now I have to pay for them. So the suffering of change. And then there's the suffering of suffering. And the suffering of suffering is described as being like mold that grows on old fruit. This is the feeling of suffering, this emotional response that we're having to having made these choices now, and the pressure that it's bearing on our lives, and the way that it's emotionally making us feel bad, and then physically we begin to feel bad because there's a direct connection between our intellectual state of mind and our heart, our happiness factor. So we begin to feel that suffering. We begin to the emotionality of it, and it kind of locks us up. It kind of paralyzes us. So it's the appearance of the greater suffering, the appearance of the greater suffering that we're in the 3 higher realms or in the 3 lower realms. And when we see that suffering, are we saying, "Oh my goodness, this is like being in the hungry ghost realm," or "My goodness, this is like being in the hell realm or being in the animal realm"? Or am I being very manipulative with people in order that I may succeed? And so when I'm being like a titan, I'm being like a demigod. Or I'm being a human being who is only thinking of themselves, who's only thinking of their own desire and blinded by their own desire. So by analyzing, by looking at who we are, what's going on in our minds, what's affecting our bodies, helps us to release the attachment to samsara's pleasures. And what that means is we begin to simplify. We begin to use more maybe common sense, because a lot of these things that we get involved in are things that we know we shouldn't get involved with for any number of reasons. We're not ready for it. We don't have the money for it. It's going to sit in the corner for the next 2 years before I have it, but I have this opportunity to get it now. Maybe I should get it. So we begin to operate in a more wise way. So all this becomes the antidote to the attachment to samsara's pleasures. Maybe we wind up giving some things away. Maybe we use the antidote of generosity, of giving these things away and saying, "I don't need these things, but maybe somebody else can use them, and this will free me up from having to think about this all the time, to worry about this some more." Any questions or comments about this? What do you think about this? Lisa, what do you think about this? I said a number of things that I know that you've thought about and talked about.
I think I'm still kind of taking it all in. Again, just continuing to draw those connections. I definitely think I suffer a lot less now that I've dug really deep into the practice. And I know I don't attend every week, and attending more and more just helps revitalize and refresh the practice as like weeks go on. And that lessens the severity of the suffering that I experience. But I think I'm still in that right in the middle where, I'm just trying to balance the consistency. But
Have
yeah.
you been able to see the causes of the suffering and accept some responsibility for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the harder parts because there's so much ego that stands in the way of taking responsibility of the pain that I've caused. But once you yeah, I had to kind of force myself to accept responsibility. And then once I got to the point where I pushed that aside, where I was able to set my ego aside, it became easier to say sorry to family members or friends or even coworkers. And, it becomes easier with practice. But there are a lot of different things I think about in connection to like karma and suffering too. Whereas like my eye injury, so I only have one eye, and sometimes I think about like I get really complex and so literal about it. Like, what could I have done in my past life that like formed into this in this life, and then how can I prevent it for the next life? So, I really really think about that like day to day.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes, my daughter was born with a congenital cataract.
Mm.
And it was before the time, it was a few years before they were doing cornea replacement and so on. And so there was nothing that could be done. And there was what could we have done? Her mother and I, and thinking about Jennifer, my daughter, what did she do to be born this way? And to look at that and so on and be able to compartmentalize that, has always been has been a ongoing process.
Yeah, absolutely. And surprisingly, it's not very painful to think. Well, I mean, I've had it since I was younger, so it's so easy to live with when you. I mean, I guess that's debatable when you go through things as a child. I think for me, it was easier to live with it as an adult. But then, yeah, I just make those connections, and I just try to think about it very concretely. Um, with the past life and the current life and the next life. And I really like that quote. I took a picture of it. I can't remember it, but I like the quote in the practice that we did in the beginning, from the Buddha. And if I can look it up, but I'm not very good at retaining things like that. But it was basically implying like what you do now is what you will be.
Right.
And so I really want to try to take a look at that every day so that I can
Sure.
practice it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, I know. I think in our lives, there's something that just doesn't fit properly. We want it to fit, but it just doesn't fit properly. And no matter what we do, it never seems to just clunk in. The gears don't come together. But in my case, I just see it as something that I have to kind of work through. And maybe there's a fault there that I suffer, but I don't think of it as a suffering. I just the perfection of being able to overcome that is just working through it, having to say, okay, this is now the situation. I have to continue to work through it. And maybe this whole entire life, I have to work through this whole entire life with that particular imperfection.
Thank you for sharing, Beza.
Would anybody else like to comment about this?
Well, I'll say something, and it's a bit off the beaten track because one text I've drawn inspiration from, I read a very long time ago by Rudolf Steiner called The Meaning of Karma. and of course he was a theosophist, but what he said was what karma means that within each of us is a very wise being that knows what we need in this life to become a better person. And that's the meaning of karma. It's our opportunity to become a better person to the sufferings that we experience in this life. And the sufferings have been arranged by this very wise being inside of us. So we should look at all our sufferings as an opportunity for growth. All of our negative karma as an opportunity for growth. And I've probably tried to look at all my problems that way as well, though sometimes, of course, it's difficult. But that's what I draw inspiration from more than anything else.
That's a great saying. I think that's terrific. I've never heard that expressed. That's great. Thank you. So, being a Buddha, we talked about this several weeks ago, a month or two ago, what it is to be Buddha. But I want to just remind ourselves that all this is the human condition, is the human story. And Buddha is the perfection of being able to transcend all the suffering so that we're not fixated with attachment or aversions to all this physical stuff, all this intellectual stuff, and that we just become part of what all this is. And so we talk about the Buddha as being awakened to all this stuff, and we have all this potential within ourselves. So what I'm trying to say is that we all are potential Buddha. Buddha is not some kind of a supreme being or something like that who's pulling the levers or pulling the ropes or managing the strings. We're not marionettes or anything like that. But it's within us to be able to realize our true nature. And the true nature is characterized by the bodhicitta, the loving kindness, compassion, joy, and the equanimity. And I think every talk that we have, we always come back to talking about bodhicitta because that's how pervasive it is, or that's what it is. That's our best communication as to what this is, of what it is to be a pure human being, a complete human being, is to be a Buddha. And we have that within our ability. And whether we get it, whether we recognize that or we reach that perfection today or tomorrow or next week or next lifetime, doesn't matter. And being on the path gives us that liberation, that there is this path and so on. And when we begin to think of, the cosmos and we're seeing all these things, images that the telescopes are bringing back and so on, it's mind-boggling, but at the same time, we're all part of that. And all that can be experienced within ourselves, and realizing that, seeing that, being able to be that is the Buddha, is being Buddha, what we call Buddha. Other traditions may have another name for it. They may call it God. They may call it Brahma or Krishna. They may call it the Atman. They may call it the Tao, the way of virtue. They may call it Mohammed or whatever names they have. So I'll leave it to you to look at your background to say, well, who is the the ultimate hero, who is the supreme being in your tradition, and say, oh, well, that supreme being was trying to tell us something about our true nature that we all have within ourselves. Not that they are the one, oh, you should worship me because I'm going to not only save your life or save your soul or something like that, but I'm going to give you everything that you want and so on. But really, it's about teaching you that it's all within yourself. And as Feza just said, was saying about the quote, what we do today is what we become tomorrow. How we got here today is not near as important as what it is that we're doing today so we can enjoy tomorrow. But the enjoyment from tomorrow never comes. When does tomorrow come? Does tomorrow ever arrive? No, we're always looking to tomorrow. There's always another tomorrow. So it's the now. The only thing that we can control is what's happening right now. So we have to analyze, what is our situation now? Happiness, suffering, the potential for happiness, the potential for suffering. What are those causes? What are the conditions? And how can I manage all of that? So during the process, we're looking at ourselves in the 6 human realms. This talk tonight is really about the suffering of samsara. So you can read in the Jewel Ornamental Liberation, if you have a copy of that, or you can look things up on Google. Google's gotten very good for these things. If there's something I can send you or something, I'll be more than glad to do that. But what we have to look at ourselves, like in a mirror, is how we appear in terms of those 6 human realms. Are we behaving like a god? Are we behaving like a jealous god? Are we behaving like a confused human being, a desirous human being, like an ignorant animal, like a greedy, hungry ghost, or as a terribly suffering hell being? So it's coming to terms with the reality of what we appear to ourselves as and how we can change. If we say, oh, I want to be more like what I imagine the Buddha to be, that true nature, that potential that we have, then we should write down or look it up and say, well, what are the qualities of that? And then begin to assimilate those qualities into yourself. Now, that's not easy to do, and that's why we have the practices. That's why we have the Buddha Dharma to teach us what that is like. And that's why we need to learn and do the practices to help us to do that. And slowly, slowly, we become more like the ideal of what we think a complete human being is. Someone who's patient, someone who's generous, someone who has mindfulness, someone who has a morality about them, and someone who contains all this and is the absorption of all this and radiates all of this, not for themselves, for their own sake, but for the sake of all beings. So that's why we're studying the Buddha Dharma, because it's so well articulated. Okay. So I kind of feel like I've talked around this enough for tonight. I'm more than glad to have more conversation about this. If somebody wants to ask a question or two or make some comments, observations about this. Does this seem true to you? Does this seem false to you? I'm always curious as to why, hearing all these things, people don't want to really dig in with this. Is it a question of opportunity, a question of saying, well, I'm too busy, I don't have the time, or it's too abstract, I'm not ready for it, it hasn't sunk in, I need to hear these things more and more over and over again. All those things can be true, and that's all okay. Because it is a process.
Hey Lance, have you ever heard of the marshmallow test that they give to kids where the experimenter will come in the room to like a 3 or 5-year-old and say, okay, they'll leave the marshmallow bag in there and they say you can have one now when I leave, or if you wait 5 minutes, you can get 2. Right. So they'll have the video camera in. Have you seen this before?
I think I've heard about it years ago, but please go ahead.
Oh, it's just interesting going to the question you're posing about why people don't dive into spirituality. So like it's interesting looking at the camera, the hidden camera, watching some kids will start licking it to try to find loopholes around. Some kids are just it's almost eerie. Some kids are just like, oh, okay, I'll get more if I just wait. And then the other kids are like, they're just I'm gonna have it right now at very young ages before age 8, before there's all this social and conventional training. And it makes me go back to the question you just asked about why are some people maybe more likely or not. And I wonder if some of it is just inherently part of that person's pathway. Like, and you can even almost see it in certain ways that we conventionally research behavioral health, right? Like where you can see like impulse control or tolerating delays to get something more that maybe more an abundance of, like idea, the conceptual. So, but I when you started talking about that, it made me chuckle because I work with kids and I think about, before they're age 8, like some of their patterns before they become sort of trained into these habits. And I think some of it inherently is just cultural. And then also I think there is, I think there's at a spiritual level, like what you've done in your past life will determine where you are ready now to meet the opportunity that presents itself for teachings and such. Yeah, I was thinking about that today, though, Lance, about being born in the Western culture, whether it was a blessing or curse, as I was trying to practice everything we've been working on for the last several years. Like, as it was happening, like some of the wisdoms and stuff, it was a difficult day for me. And I was thinking, like, I have an abundance of in the Western culture, like Whole Foods is right there. I have all these things, cell phones, and then all these things that are keeping me from what you described. Less is more, like the things you were describing 6 or 7 minutes ago. Like you become more wise, make fewer things, less. It's almost inherently impossible in a Western culture. It requires a very level of like perseverance and resolve and dedication. Like you have to be so laser focused on spirituality is a goal in your life. Like it has to be an active goal or it is not going to be watered. Like I have on my vision board, spirituality, 7 hours of practice a week written down. It is so intentional. Otherwise it would not happen. Like it's everywhere I go. It's in writing. It's all around me because it's living and breathing it, because it's so easy to go off the path on the hour every day. So sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. That was very good. And I had to take notes because you said so many good things right there. I wanted to remember them if we could comment on them.
I'm going to send you the video of the marshmallow test because it's funny, the YouTube videos.
Does anyone else have a comment about what Zara just said or what Feza has said or anything else that we've talked about?
Oh, I just have a little funny thing to say because Zara just talked about a psychological experiment. I recently read about another psychological experiment where they asked college students to sit quietly in a room for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes, 15, all by themselves without cell phones or anything else, just to sit in an empty room by themselves and think for 15 minutes. And they gave them the option to get out of the room early by pressing a button and receiving an electric shock. And the majority of the students, rather than sit quietly and think for 10 or 15 minutes, preferred to receive the electric shock and get out of the room early. And I posted a link to that on Twitter and I said, good luck to meditation teachers. So I don't know. This is terrible because old people like to complain about how young people aren't good anymore, but I just found the whole experiment so funny. And I don't know what it means, except we're all addicted to uh, uh, sensation now. It's just gotten that much harder to meditate for everybody. I'm sure. I remember when I went up to Delaware to do the 10-week retreat, the first thing they did was they asked for your cell phone and they put it in a little plastic bag and you got it back at the end of the 10 days, and I'm wondering how many people might have attachment problems these days. Anyway, it's just me complaining about how terrible kids are these days, but I still found it funny.
Well, no, I think it's great. I think it brings up a point that we all go through is, what is our rationalization for our life and what's our compromise to be able to remain in this life or to have this life, to enter into this life? How much suffering are we willing to take on in order to have what appears to be the pleasures and so on? Where's our compromise?
Yeah, well, it's true. People, well, this is what they call, I guess this would be the suffering of change. People are, in a different sense, people are addicted to change. They just can't tolerate boredom anymore, can't tolerate being quiet and still anymore.
Well, maybe it's their
That includes
resistance to the
myself.
change.
I mean, it's certainly a lot of times sitting down to meditate. It's not the easiest thing to do. Sometimes.
Well, that's true. Yes. No, you're right about that. And when I think about, for myself, um, just letting all this go, let it all go to black, and it's at one point it would be a terrorizing thought, but the more that I've experienced, the more that I've, I don't know if it's an acceptance or what it is, but that's so for me, the samadhi is the answer to this, and the samadhi is that meditation mind, and there's a whole other big talk about this. There's a whole very big, thick sutra teaching given by the Buddha, 2,600 years ago, about what it is to be in the samadhi, to be in the state of mind, being a human being, but being in this awakened state of mind with no attractions, no aversions, no confusions, and so on like that. And what it means to remain stable in that. So it's an interesting thing, and I think that's what the Buddhism points to.
Lance, the timing of tonight's discussion on the content is really significant for me because I'm going to be going away for 17 days in a remote.
All right, yes.
I don't mind sharing with you. I'm going to Greenland to hike for 17 days in the Arctic Trail. It's really remote. So it's funny listening to Bernie talk, and I think I was supposed to hear his comment. I've been like stressing out about like battery packs so I can recharge my Apple Watch every so many days, like finding all these geeky solar powered this and that. And then like listening to Bernie share that story just made me realize like, I don't actually need to wear this watch. Like 100 years ago, nobody gave a shit about steps or whatever. And I'm like, why do I actually care? So I think I'm just gonna let it go. I literally just challenged myself after I heard Bernie discuss all of this stuff. And I'm like, I had to start questioning, like, why am I carrying all this extra shit when I'm going to actually just be in nature and look at the lights and the Northern Lights and just have this beautiful 100-so-mile journey in wilderness. I don't know. I don't know why. I literally just had to ask myself, I'm stressing myself out about this evening before I get on the flight tomorrow. And this is my opportunity to practice right now. Like, do I really need all this stuff? Like, I was even going to try to bring my iPad, y'all. and charge it with solar. I was going to download all this stuff to listen at night in the tent. And I'm like, why am I doing that?
Wasn't that a question you would have asked the organizers of this trip? Should I bring all this stuff? Do I need all this stuff? Can I leave this stuff behind?
Well, yeah.
What if you leave it all behind and you get there? How many people are going to be in the group?
It's a private, it's just me and a
Oh,
guide.
well, then
yeah.
you got total control over it.
Yeah.
What do you want it to be? So then there's that. Yeah, that's a very interesting question.
Well, I think to your point though, there's wisdom in tonight's conversation for me, because I'm like, everything you all are saying is like less. Like I'm taking way too much things for all these contingencies, and then a lot of them are just like okay, Wi-Fi, like all, and I'm like, like who cares?
Yeah, no,
Like
I relish the day that we don't have to have cell phones anymore when they become obsolete or something, or they don't work anymore.
Oh, what's going to happen is they're going to put a chip in your head. That's going to be even worse.
Well, maybe not my head, but somebody's head. Yeah, maybe so. Will we still be human beings in that situation?
No, it'll be just like a cell phone. It'll be embedded in your head.
I don't know.
yeah.
It sounds pretty horrible, actually, but
In
anyway.
the Superman movie, the Kelex. Did you see? Have you seen the Man
No.
of Steel? And he's
Yeah.
followed around by this thing that it's like it's in a magnetic field all the time, and it just follows him around, and it can create holographic images of the person that he's communicating with. But it's a future cell phone,
Okay.
that has all the smart capability and all that.
Maybe we'll just have smart glasses. They keep trying to push that, but then nobody wants to buy them. So
Yeah,
who
but
knows?
so back to Zara's point is, back to nature. What
Yeah.
does it mean to be back to nature and just rely on yourself? And if you're going to just be with this one other person, your guide and so on, that's going to be a magnificent trip.
You might need the cell phone in the airport. I always think that it's helpful in the airport, but once you get out in the wilderness, I'm not so sure you're going to need it. Not sure you're going to be able to use it. There's not going to be a signal out there, probably.
So what do you think you're going to do, Zara?
Oh, I'm going to let it go. I'm just listening to you all. Like my inner gut was like kept saying, like, why are you making it more than it needs to be? Like, you're going to be, the whole purpose of this trip was for me to be in nature, and I'm complicating it because of habit behaviors and addiction and attachment to shit in my life. Like, it's like I have to have the iPhone out, and like, what if I didn't record every moment on video, right?
Oh,
'Cause
that's right. You got to upload everything to the social media. I forgot about that. You got to take pictures and upload it to social media. That's the new thing, right?
Yeah.
Of
So
course.
like I want to share all that. Like I want to share my joy with people. However, like there's a point of diminishing return, right? In my whole entire experience.
Well, I don't know. It gets
No?
difficult when it's that long a trip to recharge the camera or phone or whatever. And I understand your difficulty.
Yeah.
And you do want to share the stuff with everybody
Do you
else.
have a solar charger?
I do. But like I think the point is that I was trying to like be like, okay, my Aura ring, my Apple Watch, my iPad, my iPhone, and I'm listening to you guys talk. I'm like, why am I bringing all this crap? I only need like the Aura ring maybe and an iPhone. I don't need anything else. I can record what I need, and this gives me sleep. If I really want to be nerdy for 17 days, I can get it off the ring. So it's crazy. Like when you're like 10 or 15 minutes going, you're like, you start having discernment and realizing like reducing, giving things away. And I'm like, I can leave the Apple Watch here. I don't need the charger. Like, why do I need it? I don't need it. So.
Well, I think that was the point I was trying to make a little while ago was, would the Buddha, would our Buddha nature care about these things?
No.
And what is the Buddha nature? The Buddha nature is just to be a complete natural human being.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for their insights, because I'm literally like just going to take a deep breath and know it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I'll get a picture.
Well, good. Well, yes. Well, be safe and come back safe.
You'll get a postcard, Lance.
All
From
right.
the
Thank you very
from the
much.
middle of nowhere, Greenland, you'll get a postcard. There may be like a polar bear claw on it, but you'll get a
I
postcard.
wonder who the mailman is up there.
Well, it's all like military bases.
Oh, okay. But there was something else you said when you were talking, when you were introducing that whole thing, and that was you didn't say it in these terms, but there is a spiritual pride that can develop. That, you know, our spirituality can be a source of attachment. That, you know, oh, I'm better because I know these things, I can do these things, and so on, like that. And that's a huge trap. You know, so the ego will attach to anything, and it will attach to, you know, oh, I'm such a good meditator, I'm this, I'm that, and so on, like that. So we have to be wary of that, and to evaluate from time to time. And maybe as you're planning this trip, you're thinking you're going to do this trip and everything, and sometimes doing without becomes the way in which you get back to real.
Has anyone else ever done like a backpacking trip out in like backcountry, like for 3 nights or longer?
No.
I'm
Well, I
doing
went
my
to India. I went to India for 3 weeks, and that was an interesting thing because you didn't have the benefit of the internet. It wasn't working very well. There was a whole lot of things, and finally, it just got to the point where I said, "Well, I'm not going to fool with it." You know, I was trying to email stuff, and it was just very frustrating. They had a baud rate of 4 or something like that. You know, and so I just said, I'm going to let it go, and I'm just going to enjoy myself.
The reason why I asked was because when you go out into nature, it takes about 3 nights, and then you are like, oh, this is what it's like to be in a Buddha nature. Because I'm a backpack. Like I just love being out in nature, and I love getting out and away. And it's on the third night where you really like, oh, this is peace. And it's like you are living in a constant state of meditation. And it's almost like letting go of sugar. They typically say it takes a few days, like the detox pains.
Right.
And you're like, oh, this is what it feels like to have clarity in my brain without all the sugar highs, the up and down of sugar or salt or whatever. That's what it's like when you go out on these like hikes for me. Like when I try to get out, it's the 3 days, and then it's like, oh, quiet, calm, you come down. But it takes at least 3 full days out, and then it starts, you're like, okay. But that's hard for a lot of people, Lance.
Well, I understand. But it's going to be a great trip for you. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have any thoughts or questions? I think it's been a good talk. I'm glad to hear what you all have said and so on. I think that's great. And all we try to do is just give encouragement, you know, give some ideas and, start your own critical thinking. Okay. So unless there's something else, Matt, you were the Omze this evening. Will you recite the dedication prayers for us, please? And everybody can mute their microphones and can recite along with Matthew, so we don't have to just listen to him. We can partake of the dedication prayers ourselves, which is what we should do.
I'd like to do all of them from the lineage dedication through the Lord Jingden Sundam prayer.
Yeah, we have plenty of time for that. That'd be great.
Okay. Dorje Shang, Talopa Naropa, Marpa Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Pagmo Drupa, and Lord Drinkumpa, please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessings of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue, may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drinkumpa Ratnashri, who is omniscient Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara, nirvana, and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Om. Om, Ah, Om. Om, Ah, Om. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Very good. Thank you all very much. Thank you all on YouTube for joining us. We're getting more and more subscribers. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, any comments that you'd like to send, you'd be more than welcome to. And if you want to be part of our group, you can send a request and we'll send you the information you need to be able to log on when we do this on Monday evenings at 7 o'clock Eastern Time in the evening. So thank you all for joining us. Our email address is buddhapracticestudy@gmail.com. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Good luck, Zara. All right.